I'm Dylan, 45, a pediatric nurse from Tennessee. The voicemail from the bank said, "You're 3 months delinquent on your $645,000 mortgage." Problem was, I never bought a house, and the name on the paperwork was mine, forged clean. Even now I can still hear the hymns from that Sunday festival and feel the heat rising in my chest. If you've ever been asked to stay silent for the sake of family, tell me, where are you listening from today? The hallway hummed with fluorescent light, steady and sterile. Outside room 412, the ventilator sighed in rhythm, steady, faithful, unrelenting. I stood motionless, watching its rise and fall through the glass. There's something calming about predictable machines. They don't ask questions, don't pretend they understand, and never expect you to talk during the silence. My name glowed on the edge of my badge. RN, Dylan R. Ashford. 16 letters, worn from use. 16 letters that meant something in this building, even if they never did back home. The ICU was quiet that night. Holidays had passed. Flu season was tapering off. Most of our kids were either sleeping or sedated, and the few who weren't, well, they clung to cartoons and the soft drone of nurses whispering in corners. I leaned against the counter at the nurses' station, sipping burnt coffee and trying not to check the time again. Micah strolled over, hands in his coat pockets, wearing that smirk I'd learned to translate years ago. "You dodging another family dinner?" he asked. I gave him a look. "That obvious?" He chuckled. "You do realize Sunday dinner is not a disease you can avoid with gloves and hand sanitizer." "Same script, different Sunday," I said, half smiling. "Reed's the guest of honor, Mom's overcooking, and I'm the seat filler nobody notices unless I skip." Micah nudged my shoulder. "She loves you, Dylan, just not as loudly." I said nothing. There were too many things to say, and none of them sounded right under hospital lights. My phone buzzed against the counter. Voicemail. One new message, Knoxville Volunteer Credit Union. Urgent. That stopped me. Micah raised an eyebrow. "You good?" "Yeah," I lied, pocketing the phone. "Probably another offer to refinance the car I don't own." He didn't push. He never did. That's what I liked about Micah. He let silences stay silent. My shift ended at 11:42. I didn't bother changing, just grabbed my hoodie and headed for the parking garage. The night air was cold, not sharp, but enough to make my breath cloud. My old sedan wheezed awake like it needed encouragement. Home was 15 minutes away, tucked in the older side of Cedar Bluff. Second floor of a 2-family house with a porch that creaked like it missed the weight of real family. Inside, I kicked off my shoes, watered the fern by the window, and played the voicemail while heating leftover lentil soup. Mom's voice crackled, cheerful and precise. "Hi, sweetheart. Just a reminder about Sunday. Reed's got something special planned. You know how he is. Always full of surprises. Try not to miss this one, okay?" I stirred the soup slowly, her words settling around the kitchen like fog. Something special. From Reed, that could mean anything from a new Porsche to a podcast launch. I hadn't spoken to Reed one-on-one in months, not since the last dinner, where he announced his newest investment venture, and I quietly passed him the salad. Out of habit, I reached into the drawer near the sink and pulled out my wallet. Inside the second flap was a photo, edges curled and color fading. Me, Reed, and our dad on a dock at Douglas Lake. I must have been 10, Reed 13. Dad held the fishing rod like a sword. Reed flashed his perfect toothy grin. I stared straight ahead like I knew even then who would be remembered. The soup boiled over. I cursed softly, turned off the burner, and reached for a towel. My thumb brushed the edge of the phone, still resting on the counter. I opened Facebook out of reflex. There it was. Reed standing in front of a sprawling craftsman-style house, one arm around his wife, the other holding a key. The caption read, "Built for the future. Ashford legacy starts here." A quick scroll through the comments revealed the usual parade. Praise, emojis, someone asking if he'd designed it himself. I sat down on the couch, phone in one hand, spoon in the other, soup forgotten. There was a flicker of something in my chest. Not anger, not even jealousy. Just that old, familiar sense of distance. Like Reed and I had taken two roads out of childhood, and I'd ended up on the quieter one, the one no one maps. I told myself I was happy for him, that he'd worked hard for it, that I didn't want a house like that anyway. But it stayed with me. His smile, the plaque beside the door that read, "The Ashfords." Plural. As if I'd been singular all my life and never knew. The next morning I planned to call Mom. Maybe I'd ask what something special really meant. Maybe I wouldn't. But I'd show up Sunday, like always. Seat filler, background brother. Just as I reached for the coffee tin, my phone buzzed again. Voicemail. One new message. Knoxville Volunteer Credit Union. I stared at it for a long second before playing it. "Mr. Ashford, this is a courtesy reminder. You are now 3 months delinquent on your mortgage account ending in 4732 in the amount of $645,000. Please contact us immediately to avoid foreclosure proceedings." I didn't move, didn't breathe. I didn't have a mortgage. The porch light flickered twice before settling into a soft, amber glow. From the driveway, I could see Reed standing on the stepladder, holding a screwdriver like a microphone. Our father steadied the ladder, nodding as if this minor household fix were a televised renovation miracle. "Just needs a firm hand," Reed said, his voice carrying through the evening like it always had. Confident, just loud enough for approval. I parked down the street, as usual. The driveway had been full, or at least that's what I told myself every time I chose the walk over the awkward shuffle of hellos. By the time I reached the steps, Reed had finished. He clapped Dad on the back, and they both turned toward the door without noticing me. I followed them in silently. Inside, nothing had changed. The same scent of lemon cleaner and old carpet. The same narrow hallway, still too crowded with coat hooks. And the same wall of family photos, stretching from the entry to the dining room. Most of them were of Reed. Reed winning the regional swim meet. Reed's college graduation. Reed in a tuxedo, grinning with his arm around his new wife. My face appeared in exactly 2 frames. One of them was a blurry shot of my high school orchestra concert. The other was my nursing school graduation, an 8x10 that had been cropped to fit a 5x7 frame and hung slightly crooked, tucked behind the thermostat. In the dining room, Mom was arranging roasted chicken and buttered rolls with the same precision she used to cut crusts off our sandwiches. She looked up and smiled, too brightly. "There you are," she said. "We were wondering if you were coming. Did you get stuck at the hospital again?" "No," I said, taking off my coat. "Just took the long way." She nodded, already turning her attention back to the table. Reed and Dad were talking about interest rates and construction permits. I took my usual seat, middle left beside the china hutch. Out of view, out of mind. Dinner began like a rerun I could mouth along with. "Reed just closed on that big place in Westmoreland," Mom said, beaming. "Did I tell you the couple had been looking for almost 2 years?" "You raised a closer," Dad said, nudging her. She laughed. "That's what I keep saying." Reed shrugged modestly, as if he hadn't practically built the house himself in the telling. "Right time, right seller." I focused on my plate, carving the chicken neatly, even though I wasn't particularly hungry. Mom turned to me. "How's the hospital? Still in pediatrics?" "Yeah," I said. "We had a kid come in with undiagnosed diabetes last week. Scary numbers. We caught it early, though." She blinked. Maybe someday you'll become a doctor, huh? My fork paused mid-air. Reed chuckled. Still got time, little bro? I like where I am, I said. I forced a smile, swallowed the words I really wanted to say. You've never once asked what I do all day. The conversation shifted quickly back to real estate, land costs, property taxes, Reed's thoughts on zoning law. I excused myself to refill my water. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter and breathed. The same wooden cabinets from my childhood still creaked when opened. The same ticking came from the mantel clock in the next room. When I returned, Reed was standing, gesturing grandly. I've decided to open my own office downtown, he announced. Branding, team, signage, the works, Ashford Realty Group. Mom clapped. Oh, Reed, that's wonderful. Dad raised his glass. My eldest boy, always aiming higher. Nobody looked at me. I stirred my drink slowly, letting the ice melt into something flavorless. The chair felt harder than it should have. I counted ceiling tiles, then window panes, then the seconds until dessert. I think I'm going to head out, I said after helping clear the dishes. So soon? Mom asked. Reed hasn't even shown us the floor plan. Rain check, I said, grabbing my coat. Reed walked me out. At the doorway, he gave my shoulder a squeeze. Drive safe, lil' bro. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Sure. The air outside was cooler than I expected. I walked slowly to my car, letting the quiet swallow me. Back home, I tossed my keys on the table and pulled the envelope from the side counter, still unopened, still heavy in my hand. I sat down and peeled it open. Inside were the same documents I'd seen before but hadn't fully read. This time, I did. Name, Dylan Richard Ashford loan amount, $645,000 delinquency, 3 months property address, 4817, Westmoreland Drive, Westmoreland. Reed's voice echoed in my memory. Right time, right seller. I looked up. On the mantel above me was a velvet-lined box. Inside, my father's gold wristwatch ticked quietly, the one he gave Reed for his 30th birthday. That same year, I got a 6-pack of socks and a card that read, "We're proud of both our boys." I leaned back and closed my eyes. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe this was all a mistake. But the address on that paper, the name on the loan, told me otherwise. The bank smelled faintly of paper and floor wax, like every other bank in every other town. I sat across from a man named Charles, whose nameplate said Senior Account Manager, and whose expression said he'd rather be talking about anything but this. He slid a folder across the desk, its edges crisp, untouched. I opened it. The first page was a loan summary. My name was typed cleanly at the top. Dylan Richard Ashford. The digits below it were all familiar. My social security number, my current address, my employer's name, and, somehow, a listed annual income of $195,000. Charles tapped that line gently with his pen. This was the figure used to qualify the mortgage, he said. Verified via tax transcripts. Income for a medical professional. I blinked. That's not even close. I'm a nurse, not a neurosurgeon. He didn't smile. Well, the paperwork went through. He flipped the page and pointed at the bottom. A signature. My name again. In cursive that looked close enough to mine to make my stomach turn. I scanned further. There were pages of forms, federal disclosures, application agreements, homeowners insurance paperwork. All of it signed. All of it dated 3 months ago. 3 months ago, Reed had called me, asking for a favor. Said he was helping a couple sort their taxes and needed to see how a real W-2 looked for reference. You're the cleanest person I know, he'd joked. I'd emailed him a redacted pay stub without a second thought. Now, it was sitting right here, printed and filed, used to help secure a loan I never applied for on a property I didn't know existed until last night. I need copies of all of this, I said. Charles hesitated. They're technically already your copies, Mr. Ashford, but given the circumstances, I'll print duplicates. I nodded. My voice felt thinner than it should have. Thank you. As he walked off to the back printer, I pulled out my phone. My fingers moved automatically, typing in the name, Bethany Greer. We'd gone to nursing school together. She now worked at a different branch of Volunteer Credit Union in fraud prevention. I sent a short text. Can I talk to you? Privately. Urgent. It's about a mortgage. Charles returned and laid the papers down neatly in front of me. I'd strongly suggest filing a fraud report. Identity theft cases like this aren't uncommon, unfortunately, especially with family. The pause in his sentence was polite, practiced. I knew he'd seen this before. I also knew what he wasn't saying, that this wouldn't be easy, and that there'd be questions I didn't want to answer. I gathered the documents, slid them into my messenger bag, and shook his hand. Outside, the sun was too bright, the sidewalk too quiet. Back home, I dropped the bag on the kitchen table and pulled out my laptop. I opened my email, heart thudding harder than I expected. There it was. A spam folder message, dated 3 months ago. Forwarded message from dashford34@gmail.com, just 1 digit off from my real address. The message itself was short, just a form confirmation with a digital signature attached. I clicked the PDF. At the bottom of the page, beneath the typed fields of my name, address, and employer, was the same looping signature I'd seen at the bank. It wasn't mine, but it looked like it could have been. That was the worst part. The spring jubilee always smelled like lemon pie and trampled grass. I hadn't been in years, but this time I came because Mom asked. And maybe, if I'm honest, because I needed to see for myself how far this thing had really gone. Children laughed somewhere near the bounce house. A teenager strummed hymns on an acoustic guitar under the oak tree by the church steps. Long tables were lined with pastel quilts and sheet cakes. The Ashfords were hosting again, and everyone knew it. Reed stood at the center of it all, arms crossed, smiling like a man born to wave from balconies. He wore a white polo, sunglasses perched on his head, and that easy charisma that turned small-town doubt into loyalty. He shook hands with Pastor Tom, then posed for a photo beside the new playground slide. Mom spotted me first. She bustled over, arms open. "There's my sweetheart," she said, wrapping me in a hug that smelled like powdered sugar and old perfume. "I was beginning to think you'd skip again." "I'm here," I said. She cupped my face gently. "You should talk to Reed. He's nervous about today, though you wouldn't know it, the way he's beaming." I glanced past her to the platform where Dad was adjusting the microphone. Reed stood beside him, nodding. "What's today about?" I asked. Mom smiled like I was being silly. "They're unveiling the new playground. Don't tell anyone, but Reed funded most of it." I almost said it, almost asked with whose money, but I kept my mouth shut. Not here, not yet. We walked over together. A crowd had gathered. Kids sat cross-legged on the lawn. Reed stepped up and took the mic from Dad. "This community means everything to me," he began, voice smooth, rehearsed. "And it means even more to my family. We believe in investing where roots run deep." I stood in the back, among the folding chairs, arms crossed. Reed continued. "This new playground is just a small way of saying thank you for raising me, supporting me, trusting me with your homes and dreams." People clapped. Cameras flashed. Then came the unveiling. 2 men in church polos tugged down a canvas sheet to reveal a polished metal plaque on a cedar post. Playground generously funded by Mr. D. Ashford. The air shifted. I felt it before I even processed it. My chest tightened, breath caught in my throat. Not Reed Ashford, D. Ashford. Me. I didn't move, just stared at the name. The name I'd built with quiet years in hospital rooms, on long night shifts, comforting scared parents and children who couldn't speak. That name was now standing here, under a bright Tennessee sky, soaked in someone else's praise. Mom leaned in, whispering, "Reed's done a lot for this community. Sometimes sacrifices have to be made, Dylan. Maybe you'll understand one day." Her hand rested on my arm. I didn't flinch, but I also didn't nod. I smiled, just barely, then stepped away. By evening, the park was empty. I'd gone home early, skipped the pie, didn't stay for the photos. I sat in my apartment with the lights low and called Micah. "I need you to help me look into something," I said. Micah didn't ask why. He knew my voice too well. "Quietly?" he asked. "Yeah, very." We hung up. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A message from Bethany. "That loan? IP address traces back to Reed's home Wi-Fi." I stared at the screen for a long while. Then I stood, walked to the bedroom, and opened the small drawer in my nightstand. Inside was a woven leather bracelet, brown and faded, edges frayed. My mother had given it to me when I graduated nursing school. "Something to remind you where you come from," she'd said. I held it for a moment. Then I set it on the dresser and closed the drawer. I stayed just outside the line of sunlight, tucked beneath the shadow of a striped tent pole at the far edge of the church lawn. From where I stood, I had the perfect view of Reed. Center stage, arms open, smile warm. He looked like a politician on the Sunday sermon circuit. All charm, all polish. The banner fluttered in the breeze above him. Ashford family, honored sponsors of Westmoreland Park. Sweet tea flowed from glass dispensers on folding tables. Children ran barefoot through patches of clover. Someone strummed Amazing Grace nearby, and my mother's lemon cake was already half gone. It was small-town Tennessee at its purest, and I had never felt more out of place. Reed took the microphone with practiced ease. "What makes a neighborhood strong," he began, "isn't just the homes we live in, but the people who lift each other up." He gestured toward the playground behind him, newly finished, bright with primary colors. "And when we invest in that spirit," he continued, "we're not just building parks, we're building legacy." The crowd applauded. Mom dabbed at the corners of her eyes. Dad stood with arms crossed, nodding proudly like every word was gospel. I shifted my weight, arms folded, trying to pretend I was invisible. "This," Reed said, raising his voice slightly, "was possible thanks to family. Ours and yours. The Ashfords have always believed in giving back." My father added, loudly from the front row, "Reed's always believed in giving back. We raised him right." People chuckled approvingly. Then Mom turned and spotted me in the crowd. She crossed over quickly, took my hand like I was still 10 years old and too shy to say hello. "This means the world to your father," she said softly. "To all of us. You understand that, don't you?" I nodded because it was easier than the alternative, easier than asking how much of our generosity had been built on my name. The speech ended to a standing ovation. Reed bowed slightly, then stepped back to let the pastor speak. Volunteers pulled down a canvas sheet covering the new playground plaque. The cloth dropped with a flourish, revealing polished bronze beneath. "Generously funded by D. Ashford." Not Reed Ashford, not Ashford family, just me. A quiet laugh escaped my lips, brief, bitter. No one noticed. They were too busy clapping. I turned and walked away before the pastor started his benediction. I passed a woman, balancing a baby on her hip, and two boys fighting over a frisbee. Past a man handing out flyers for the church barbecue. Past a folding table covered in cookies and bluegrass CDs. My phone buzzed as I crossed into the parking lot. I pulled it out and typed a message to Bethany. I need everything you have on that mortgage application, and I mean everything. Her reply came quickly. Meet me tomorrow. You'll want to see this. Below it, a single line of text. Loan IP address, 192.121.68.4. 17. Registered to Reed Ashford. I stopped walking. The wind caught my shirt. Somewhere behind me, applause continued. As I stepped around the final corner of the church, a boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and pointed to the playground. Mom, Mr. Ashford built that slide. His mother looked over, following his finger. Then her eyes met mine and she smiled. Thank you, she said warmly. They've been looking forward to this all year. I smiled back. Didn't correct her. Didn't say a word. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and rain-soaked concrete. The windows fogged slightly where the warmth inside met the gray afternoon pressing against the glass. Bethany sat across from me, her blonde hair pulled into a loose braid, her cardigan sleeves pushed to her elbows. Between us sat a chipped ceramic mug, a paper napkin with 3 half-hearted doodles, and a flash drive resting like a loaded trigger. She slid it toward me. That's everything, she said. Back-end logs, submission timestamps, application routing, even IP metadata. I nodded, but didn't reach for it. You okay? She asked gently. I didn't answer right away. My hands were already moving. Laptop open, USB port ready. When the desktop chimed and the folder appeared, I clicked without hesitation. A spreadsheet bloomed on screen. Bethany leaned in, pointing to a highlighted row. That's the mortgage application submission. Date, time, browser fingerprint. It came from a residential IP address in your city. She tapped again. Matched to Reed's home network. I stared at it. The same day, she added, he bailed on lunch with your mom. Said something about a last-minute client showing. I felt my shoulders tighten, muscles pulling in like rope drawn taut. Bethany watched me carefully. This wasn't careless, Dylan. He didn't make a mistake. He didn't just guess your info. This was smart, calculated. He knew exactly what he needed and how to get it. I clicked into another document. It was a transaction history tied to the loan. Withdrawal, $30,000 purpose, cryptocurrency investment account, Dylan R. Ashford, credit line ending in 2049. Transfer to personal wallet, R. Ashford. BTC. The cursor blinked at the bottom of the screen. I whispered, almost without breath, he planned to ruin me, and they'd still cheer for him. Bethany said nothing. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't wipe it. Not from grief, from violation. I thought about my name, how it had once meant something. Quiet, sure, small maybe, but it was mine. Now it was currency, a front, a mask someone else wore to fund a life I didn't get to live. I closed the window and sat back. I need hard copies, I said. 3 sets, one for me, one for a lawyer, one for backup. Bethany nodded. I'll print them, and I'll email encrypted versions tonight. I looked at her, grateful but hollow. Thank you for not asking too many questions. She smiled, sad and steady. I already know enough. We parted outside under a cold drizzle. I walked the riverfront path home, the city quiet under low clouds. Back in my apartment, I laid the documents out like crime scene evidence. I labeled folders, created backups, filed them into a drawer I rarely used, the one with old report cards, my dad's military medals, a postcard from Reed in Spain that just said, "Live bigger." The phone rang as I slid the drawer closed. I didn't recognize the number, but the voice was immediate. "Dylan, it's Mom." Her voice trembled. "Did you talk to someone at the bank? Reed just got a call. They're asking questions about the mortgage. I don't know what's going on, but please, please, honey, let this go. It'll tear the family apart." I stared out the window at the city lights flickering across wet pavement. "Dylan?" she said again. I didn't answer. Not out of anger, but because, for the first time in years, silence felt like protection, not punishment. I hung up, closed the laptop, and let the night stay quiet. The envelope was fire truck red, too bright to ignore, too heavy to pretend it didn't matter. I found it wedged between a coupon flyer and a credit card offer in my mailbox. Across the front, bold black letters shouted, "Notice of foreclosure. Immediate action required." My first instinct was to laugh, out loud, sharp, dry, ugly. I didn't own a home. I rented a second-floor apartment with a leaky bathroom faucet and a neighbor who practiced trumpet at 10 p.m. But on paper, I apparently owned a 5-bedroom home in Westmoreland with French doors and a wine cellar. Back upstairs, I dropped the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it while the kettle screamed on the stove. The apartment was too quiet, but not in a peaceful way. In a way that made your skin itch, like the walls were waiting for you to break. I opened the letter. Legal terms flooded the page. Phrases like default notice, full balance due, and initiating foreclosure proceedings. I picked up the phone and called the attorney Micah had recommended. The woman on the line had a calm voice, the kind you trusted without meeting the face. "Mr. Ashford," she said, "if we don't file a fraud claim immediately, you'll be held responsible. That house, that debt, it's all in your name, legally. The lender doesn't care who lived in it." "I didn't sign anything," I said. "You didn't," she agreed. "But the signatures match yours close enough to pass initial review. You'll have to prove otherwise." Micah called 5 minutes after I hung up. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer right away. Then, "My account's frozen. Rent check bounced. I can't pay my bills, but my brother's drinking Merlot over mahogany floors under my credit score." Micah whistled low. "You ready for this?" I stood at the window, watching a squirrel dart across the power line. "I have to be," I said. That afternoon, I walked into the downtown police station and filed a formal report. The detective assigned to me looked like someone who had long since stopped being surprised by what people did to their own blood. "Family?" she asked, flipping through the file. "Yeah." She raised an eyebrow. "That's unfortunately common, but legally messy." "I don't care how messy it gets," I said. "I'm done being quiet." She nodded. "Then prepare yourself. Once this leaves the desk, it doesn't stay in the family anymore." Back at home, I opened the drawer I rarely touched. Inside was a manila folder I'd labeled months ago for a work project I never started. I pulled it out and wrote on it with a black Sharpie. My name. My fight. I filled it with every document, loan papers, email screenshots, IP traces. I printed Bethany's logs, copied text messages, even included a photo of the house Reed had posted, smiling like a man who'd won something fair and square. My phone buzzed on the counter. Micah again. "Your parents just invited me to Reed's office celebration." Another ping. "Want to come?" I stared at the screen, then typed, "I'll be there." The front door swung open before I could knock. Streamers rustled in the breeze. Jazz standards played softly from a Bluetooth speaker tucked into the corner of the reception desk. The smell of shrimp cocktail and meatballs in brown sugar glaze lingered in the air like expensive cologne. Reed's new office looked like a luxury spa. Glass walls, gold accents, an exposed beam ceiling that probably cost more than my car. Guests in cocktail dresses and sports jackets mingled over sparkling cider. A branded banner hung behind the reception counter. Ashford Realty Group, building more than homes. My mother saw me from across the room. Her eyes widened, not in joy, but in disbelief. "You actually came," she whispered when she reached me, pulling me into a quick hug. "Micah said there'd be cake," I replied flatly. She gave me a nervous smile, smoothing a wrinkle from her blouse. "Just be kind tonight, all right?" I didn't answer. Reed was in the middle of a story, something about a difficult seller turned grateful client, when he saw me. He raised his glass. "Well, would you look who made it?" He grinned. "Little brother decided to crash the castle." People chuckled. I offered a tight smile and stepped further into the room, folder tucked neatly under my arm. Reed returned to center stage, now holding a champagne flute. If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment. He waited for the room to quiet. "I want to thank you all for being here," he began. "This place, this dream, wouldn't be possible without the people who believed in me, my team, my clients, and of course, my family." He looked at our parents. They beamed. "To family," he said, raising his glass, "to loyalty, and to building something that lasts." That was my cue. I stepped forward. My voice was steady, calm. Not loud, but deliberate enough to cut the room. "You forgot something," I said. "Truth." Reed's smile faltered. I walked to the buffet table and laid the manila folder on the white linen, right next to the artisan cheese tray. This office, that house, the donation plaque, the playground, they all have one thing in common. I opened the folder, slowly, like peeling back bandages. "They were funded under my name," I said. "My credit, my identity, without my knowledge, without my consent." The room went silent. Reed took a half step forward, hand raised like he could wave the moment away. "Dylan, this isn't the place," he started. "No," I cut in, soft but sharp. "It never is it? There's never a good time for my truth, never a right moment for me to speak." Dad's face flushed. "Put that away, son. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said again. "What's embarrassing is a man celebrating success built on stolen trust, and a family who calls that loyalty." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "There hasn't been a right time for me in 30 years, I said. "This moment is mine." I closed the folder gently, slid it back under my arm. Reed opened his mouth, then closed it. Mom was crying now, silent, trembling. She stepped forward, grabbed my hand. "Please," she whispered. "Please, son. Don't destroy us. I'm begging you, stay quiet, for the family." Her fingers clutched mine, like they could hold back everything I'd already set in motion. I looked at her. The lines around her eyes. The way her voice cracked, not out of confusion but out of fear. Fear of what the neighbors would say. Fear of what Reed would lose. Fear of losing control over the narrative she'd rehearsed all her life. And for the first time, I didn't reach back. I just let her hand fall away. Then I turned and walked out. Not angry, not shouting, just gone. And in that moment, I didn't feel like the bad son. I felt like myself. The porch light buzzed and blinked overhead, casting a weak cone of yellow on the steps. I sat on the bottom one, elbows on knees, watching the shadows stretch across the backyard. Inside, the house hummed with tension. Raised voices, shuffling feet, the distant sound of something glass hitting a countertop too hard. Through the kitchen window, I could hear my mother's voice break between sobs. Reed's whisper followed, urgent, angry, fraying at the edges. Dad didn't say much. He never did in the heat of things. He waited until it cooled enough for him to press control back into the conversation. But out here, it was just me. Crickets and clarity. The screen door creaked open behind me. Heavy steps followed. Measured. Reluctant. Then my father sat beside me, his knees cracking louder than he probably meant them to. He didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead. "You want to burn everything down?" he said quietly. "For what? Some credit score?" I let the question sit. He continued. "It's a house, Dylan. A few signatures. It can be fixed. Quietly." I turned to him. "Is that what you're worried about? The paperwork or the noise?" He didn't answer. "I didn't do this," I said. "I didn't start the fire." He rubbed his hands together. "He's your brother." "I know." Another silence. Longer this time. Then the door opened again. Mom came out, eyes red, face pale. She stood in front of me, hands wringing the hem of her cardigan. "You'll ruin him," she said. "Everything he's worked for. His career, his marriage. Your father's health can't handle this kind of stress. Please, Dylan, don't do this." I stood up slowly, careful not to let my own anger sharpen my voice. "You're asking me to drown," I said, "just to keep him afloat." She blinked. "I've been treading water for years," I continued, "while you watched him build castles out of my name." Her voice cracked. "We didn't know. You didn't want to know." Dad looked away. I took a breath. "I'm done swimming for him," I said, "and for you." No one moved. I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't ask for understanding. For the first time, they knew I wouldn't bend. I stepped past them and walked toward my car. The porch light flickered behind me, like it didn't know whether to stay on or go out. Inside the car, I didn't start the engine right away. I sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, watching my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look broken, just emptied, but not hollow. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. One new voicemail, Knox County District Attorney's Office. Urgent callback. I stared at it for a beat, then picked it up and pressed play. "Mr. Ashford, this is Assistant DA Lorraine Hale. We've reviewed the documentation you submitted and would like to move forward with formal charges. Please contact our office as soon as possible to schedule an interview." I didn't flinch. I started the car. As I pulled away from the curb, the Ashford family mailbox came into view. Wooden, painted white, leaning slightly to the left like it had since I was a kid. I slowed, considered stopping, maybe to straighten it, maybe just to say goodbye. Then I pressed the gas. Not my house, not my burden. The fluorescent lights hummed like they were bored. Everything in the county office felt too beige. Walls, floors, even the air. The kind of place where things didn't begin, but got processed. I sat in a metal chair across from a woman who looked like she hadn't blinked in 20 minutes. Her nameplate read, Lorraine Hale, Assistant District Attorney, and her stack of manila folders looked like it could swallow mine whole. She didn't smile, and I appreciated that. "This," she said, placing a single form in front of me, "is a sworn statement of fraud and identity theft. Once you sign, we open a criminal investigation. Felony level. That includes your brother." I looked down at the form. Typed letters, neatly spaced lines, one blank line at the bottom. My name already printed above it. Ms. Hale waited. I glanced out the window, just a sliver of Knoxville sky, cut by steel blinds. "He signed my name without asking," I said finally. "I'm doing the same, except I mean it." She handed me a pen from her desk, but I pulled one from my coat pocket instead. It was old. Brass, slightly scratched, the cap wobbly from too much use. My father gave it to me when I got my first nursing job. "You'll need a good pen," he'd said, "to write what matters." I uncapped it. The ink flowed smooth, no hesitation. Dylan Richard Ashford. When I looked up, Ms. Hale was already flipping through her files. We'll begin subpoenas for financial records immediately. The mortgage, the line of credit, any related transfers. You'll be contacted soon for a formal statement under oath." I nodded. "Okay." She handed me a plain blue brochure. On the front, "Rebuilding after identity theft." She tapped one sentence with her red fingernail. "You might want to keep that one in mind," she said. I read it silently. "Your name, your power." It sounded cheesy, like something off a greeting card, but today it didn't feel wrong. She offered a final glance, neutral but not unkind. "You should prepare for pushback. This kind of case, it gets loud, especially when it's family." I stood. It's already been loud in my head for months. I'm ready to share the noise. Outside, the air was sharp. Leaves were beginning to yellow along the courthouse steps. Fall had arrived quietly, like truth often did. I pulled out my phone to text Micah. "Done." Seconds later, he replied. "Apartment next to mine just opened up. Want it?" I stared at the screen, then typed, "Yes, time to move." It wasn't just about a new lease. It was about space, distance, air. For the first time, I was moving not because I had to, but because I chose to. That night, I packed my kitchen drawers, slowly, without music or distractions. Just the scrape of silverware against cardboard. Every item was a decision. What stays, what leaves, what I was taking into this new version of me. When I reached the bottom drawer, I found the napkin where I'd scribbled that folder label weeks ago. My name. My fight. I folded it once, slipped it between two plates, and closed the box. The cardboard boxes were still taped shut. Not out of procrastination, but out of something else. Something quieter. Like reverence. Or exhaustion. My new place in Fountain City sat on the edge of a quiet street, lined with dogwoods, just a few blocks from the park. Second floor above a barber shop, with a small balcony, and just enough sunlight to keep my ferns alive. It smelled like clean paint and unfinished stories. Micah stood in the center of the living room, arms folded, surveying the space like a contractor without a clipboard. "This place has potential," he said. "Kind of like you, once you drop the family baggage." I looked up from the box I was opening, kitchen stuff, and smiled faintly. "Still carrying it," I said, "just in smaller boxes." He snorted, then picked up a mug wrapped in newspaper. "Hey, I remember this one. Didn't your mom give it to you?" I took it from him gently. It was chipped near the handle. A faded number 1 nurse logo still clung to the ceramic. I didn't answer. We unpacked in silence after that. A familiar rhythm. I didn't own much. Some books, second-hand dishes, a few blankets, a coffee maker that whined louder than it brewed. But for the first time, everything I owned felt like it truly belonged to me. No shared signatures, no someone else's debt. Just mine. Micah left after an hour, promising to return with takeout and a toolbox. I sat alone for a while, just watching the light move slowly across the floor. The knock on the door startled me. Not a visitor, just the mail. I found a thin white envelope slipped beneath the frame. Return address, Experian. My chest tightened. I opened it carefully, hands steadier than I expected. Inside, a printed credit report. Credit score, 726. Status, mortgage account removed, fraud claim accepted, no confetti, no applause, just a number. And yet it felt like air after years of drowning. I sank to the floor, the paper pressed to my chest. Eyes closed. Not to cry, just to breathe, to feel the world without the weight of someone else's shadow pressing on my shoulders. Later that night, I pulled out a small leather notebook from one of the boxes. The kind with a wraparound strap. Blank pages, cream-colored. I'd bought it 2 years ago, never written a word. On the first page, I wrote in careful print, "I own my name again." Then I set the pen down. That was enough for now. I made tea, watered the fern, hung a single frame on the wall, a photo of me, solo, standing in front of my old hospital on graduation day. No one else in the picture, just me. Smiling. My phone buzzed. A message from Reed. "You win. Hope you're proud." No apology, no explanation, just bitterness typed out with clean punctuation. I stared at it for a moment, then tossed the phone onto the couch. Not out of anger, but because, for once, it didn't have power over me. The metal chair creaked under me as I shifted, knees close, palms flat against my thighs. The circle was small. 10 people, maybe 11. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a dull yellow across the linoleum floor. The church basement smelled like instant coffee, lemon disinfectant, and slow-cooked casseroles. Someone had brought potluck, plastic containers of macaroni, green beans, and a tray of deviled eggs nobody touched. We weren't here for food. A woman named Valerie had just finished speaking. Her ex-husband had racked up nearly $100,000 on joint credit cards before disappearing across state lines. Her voice didn't tremble when she told it, but her hands stayed clenched in her lap the whole time. The group leader looked at me next. "Dylan, you don't have to, but if you'd like to share." I swallowed. The words had been circling in my chest for days, weeks, maybe longer. "My brother," I began, "took out a $645,000 mortgage in my name. He used my credit, my information, my identity." A few heads nodded. Not in shock. In recognition. "My parents knew," I added. "Eventually. And when I wanted to come forward, they begged me to stay quiet." The last part came out softer than I intended, but the silence that followed felt full, weighted, safe. I looked down at the scuff marks on the floor. "So I didn't." That was all I said. Across the circle, a woman whispered, not unkindly, "Good." The group leader smiled gently, then moved on. Another man spoke, then someone else. I don't remember their names, only pieces of their stories. Stolen tax returns, embezzling siblings, best friends turned con artists. Then the older man sitting 2 seats to my right cleared his throat. "You're not broken," he said, voice low and certain. "You're bruised, but you stood." I felt my throat tighten. He wasn't talking down to me. He wasn't trying to fix it. He was just saying the thing I needed to hear, that I had stood. When the meeting ended, most people slipped out quickly, murmuring polite goodbyes. But I stayed. Washed the coffee pot, helped fold chairs, talked with the group leader, a woman in her 50s named Connie, who wore a lanyard with a button that read, "Survivor Victim." "You should come again," she said, or "help." I hesitated, then nodded. "Put me on the volunteer list." Outside, the air was cooler than I remembered. A breeze carried the scent of cut grass and someone's lingering barbecue. I walked to my car slowly, not in a rush for once. My shoulders felt looser. My name, spoken aloud among strangers, didn't sting anymore. When I got home, something was wedged under my door. A white envelope, no postage, no handwriting except 2 words on the front. From Mom. I stood there holding it for a long time. I turned it over, felt the slight weight inside. Maybe a letter, maybe nothing. I didn't open it, not out of fear, but because, for the first time, I didn't have to. 3 envelopes sat inside my mailbox, tucked neatly together like parts of a puzzle. No bold warnings, no red stamps, just white, clean, almost ordinary. One from Experian, one from Equifax, one from TransUnion, I held them in my hand for a moment before heading upstairs, letting the early spring sun warm my knuckles through the paper. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and clean paper. A half-full mug of black coffee waited for me on the kitchen table, still steaming. On the windowsill, my fern leaned towards the light. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old wood floor. I set the envelopes down and opened them one by one. The first letter confirmed the closure of a mortgage account, flagged, investigated, and cleared of liability. The second verified removal of fraudulent credit lines. The third confirmed my credit score had been restored. I read each one twice, not because I didn't believe it, but because I needed the moment to last, the weight of it, the release. The past year hadn't disappeared. But something in me shifted. I was no longer carrying someone else's mess. This time, I wasn't the one who had to prove he existed. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth settle behind my ribs, then grabbed my keys and headed for the bank. Micah called as I backed out of the parking spot. "They cleared your record?" he asked. No hello needed. "Yeah," I said. "It's like getting my skin back." He exhaled through a laugh. "Told you. Took a while, but they can't keep a good Ashford down." I smiled, a small one. This time I get to decide what kind of Ashford I want to be. Downtown was quieter than usual. I parked outside the bank, under the same oak tree I used to pass when walking home from high school. Funny how things circle back when you're ready to face them. Inside, I was greeted by a young teller who looked barely old enough to rent a car. "New account?" she asked cheerfully. "Yes," I said, placing my ID and paperwork on the desk. "And a clean one, please." She clicked away at her keyboard, asked me to confirm the usual details. Then she paused. "How would you like your name to appear on the account?" I reached into my bag and pulled out a fountain pen. Black lacquer, gold trim, cap slightly scuffed. My father gave it to me when I graduated high school. "Every man should have a good pen," he'd said, "and know when to use it." I clicked it open, held it steady. "All of it," I told her. "Dylan Richard Ashford." She smiled. "Got it." My signature didn't shake. When I stepped back into the sunlight, something inside me felt grounded. Not triumphant, not giddy, just settled. I wasn't fixing what Reed broke anymore. I was building what he never could. Later that afternoon, I returned to the bank to meet with a loan officer. "I'd like to apply for a mortgage," I said. "Something modest, just mine." We discussed interest rates, terms, down payments. The process took longer than I expected, but every form I signed bore only one name: mine. By the time I got home, the coffee was cold. I poured it out, then opened the drawer in my desk. The pen went back into its case, no longer a symbol of anyone else's legacy. It belonged to me now. My phone buzzed, a text, from an unknown number. "You've been summoned to appear at Knox County Courthouse as a witness and filing party in case 230491. Defendant, Reed Ashford." I read it once, then again. I didn't feel fear, didn't feel rage, just a quiet certainty. This wasn't about revenge, it was about truth, and it was time. The courtroom was cooler than I expected, not cold, just absent of warmth. Like justice had no use for comfort. Hardwood floors, pale blue walls, a digital clock on the back wall that ticked too loud in my ears. Lawyers moved with the quiet efficiency of people who've seen 1,000 stories unravel across these same benches. I sat in the front row, alone. My hands rested on my knees. My manila folder, lighter now, sat unopened beside me. Then the door opened. Reed entered, wearing a dark suit that didn't quite fit anymore. He looked older. Not just tired, but smaller. His hair was neater than I'd seen it in years. His tie was slightly crooked. Our eyes met, just for a second. He looked away first. His attorney whispered something to him, guiding him to the defense table. Across the aisle, the district attorney flipped through a stack of papers, pausing occasionally to highlight a line or nod at a clerk. The judge entered, an older woman with silver hair and reading glasses that slid low on her nose. She greeted the room with a nod, then began. "This is a hearing on case Juror 23-0491, she said, filed under identity theft, mortgage fraud, and criminal impersonation. Her voice was steady, measured. Defendant Reed Ashford has agreed to a plea deal, the DA announced. Restitution of full financial damages, participation in mandatory counseling, and 2 years of probation. The agreement is contingent on victim consent. The judge turned her gaze toward me. "Mr. Ashford," she said, "do you wish to make a statement before the court?" I stood. The courtroom hushed. "My name," I began, "was taken without my permission, used like a tool, treated like property." I paused. I was asked to be quiet, for the sake of peace, for the sake of family, for the sake of everything except the truth. I glanced at Reed. His eyes were on the floor. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here because silence is a kind of theft, too, and I'm done being stolen from." The judge nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Ashford." She turned to Reed. "Do you have anything to say before I finalize the plea?" Reed stood slowly. His voice was rougher than I remembered. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't know if that's enough, but I am." He didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't beg. Maybe for the first time he just let it sit. The judge reviewed the terms one last time, then brought down her gavel with a soft, deliberate knock. Plea accepted. Just like that, it was done. Reed avoided prison. He would repay every dollar, attend counseling, and check in with a probation officer twice a month for 2 years. It wasn't harsh, but it was justice. I gathered my folder, turned to leave. Outside, the sun was too bright. Reporters lingered near the doors, whispering and checking badges. I kept walking. But before I reached the bottom steps, I heard footsteps behind me. Reed stopped beside me, hands in his pockets, eyes forward. "You were always the stronger brother," he said. "I just never knew how to say it." I didn't reply, but I didn't walk away either. And that, somehow, felt like enough. The lot wasn't much to look at. A patch of overgrown grass, wildflowers clinging to the edges. A lone wooden stake rose from the middle like a flag of quiet intention. The wind moved through the tall blades, bending them without breaking them. The smell of soil, clean, unbothered, rose as I stepped onto it. Birdsong came from somewhere behind me. A mourning dove, maybe. The morning sun was soft, filtering through thin clouds that hadn't yet decided whether they meant rain. This was mine. Micah stood beside me, holding 2 cups of coffee and squinting at a clipboard the builder had left. "You sure about this?" he asked, handing me one of the cups. I nodded, eyes still on the stake. "I want to grow something that's mine," I said, "and only mine." He didn't press, just sipped and looked out over the lot like it already had walls and windows. There were no blueprints yet, no official groundbreaking. But I knew where I wanted the door to be. I knew where the kitchen window would face, and I knew that on the right side, near the fence line, there would be a garden. Not big, just enough. Micah pulled a small lavender bush from the back of his truck. "Figured you'd want to start with something," he said. We planted it together, kneeling in the dirt, laughing over how bad we both were with shovels. The soil was loamy, a little stubborn, but it took the roots. When we finished, Micah stood and brushed his hands off on his jeans. "Looks like it belongs here," he said. I looked at the small green stalks, the purple just beginning to bud. "So do I." We were packing up when the sound of tires on gravel made me turn. A silver sedan pulled up slowly. I recognized it before I saw the license plate. My mother stepped out, a woven basket in her hands. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just softer, less composed. Her hair was pulled back, her expression uncertain. Micah gave me a look. "I'll be back in 10, he said, sliding into his truck and giving her a small nod as he passed. Mom approached slowly. "Hi," she said. I nodded. She held out the basket. "It's lemon bread, your favorite." I took it. Still warm. We stood in silence for a beat, wind tugging at the edge of her scarf. "I can't take back what I said," she murmured, "or what I didn't say, but I see it now." She looked at the lot, the stake, the fresh dirt around the lavender bush. "You weren't the quiet one, Dylan," she said. "You were just unheard." I felt something loosen in my chest. I didn't ask her in, didn't invite her to see the blueprint I carried in my back pocket. But I nodded. Just once. And that was enough. She left without asking for more. Later, back in the makeshift folding chair I'd set up on the porch to be, I opened the basket. Inside, beneath the bread wrapped in a clean dish towel, was a note. Written in her small, precise handwriting. "I'm learning how to be your mother again, if you'll let me." I read it twice, then folded it carefully, smoothed the crease. At the edge of the lot, a new mailbox had been installed last week. I walked over to it, opened the door, and placed the note inside. A boundary, but still a line of connection. Sunday morning came slow and soft, the kind of morning where the air still held a chill, but the sun promised warmth if you waited long enough. I parked at the end of the driveway. The house looked the same, but something about it felt different, like a photograph that had faded just slightly, colors worn down by time and memory. The shutters needed repainting. The hydrangeas were overgrown. A wind chime near the porch clinked without rhythm. In my hands was a small ceramic pot. Inside, a single green succulent curled toward the light. Sturdy. Quiet. Enough. It was the first time I'd been back in almost a year. I stepped onto the porch, took a breath, knocked twice. Mom opened the door like she'd been standing just behind it. Her face didn't break into a smile, but her eyes softened. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. She stepped aside. "Come in." The smell of cinnamon drifted from the kitchen, probably the rolls she used to make when Reed and I were kids, the kind she said were too sweet for breakfast, but always made anyway. The living room looked older, or maybe I just saw it differently now. Dad's recliner was empty, a blanket folded neatly on the armrest. His framed Navy photo still hung above the fireplace. "He's at rehab," she said, catching my glance. "Twice a week now. He's quieter." I nodded, unsure what to say. We moved to the kitchen. She poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs and set them on the table. No fuss, no centerpiece, just 2 cups and enough distance between us to feel honest. We sat in silence. Then, softly, "Thank you for coming." I sipped the coffee. Bitter, strong. "I didn't come for peace," I said. "I came to set new terms." She looked down, hands wrapped around her mug. "Okay." I reached into the paper bag and placed the succulent on the table between us. "It doesn't need much," I said. "But if you overwater it, it'll drown." She nodded. We didn't say more. But we didn't have to. There were no apologies, no rehashing of who said what, or when the lines got crossed. Just a shared understanding that something had broken, and that not everything broken needs fixing. Some things just need space. I stayed another 10 minutes. We talked about weather, her neighbor's new roof, a recipe for banana bread she said she was going to try. When I stood to leave, she didn't follow me to the door. Just sat there, one hand gently touching the edge of the plant like it might say something if given enough time. On the way out, I passed Reed's old car still parked in the gravel pull-off beside the fence. The paint was fading, a spiderweb crack spreading across the windshield. It hadn't moved in months. I didn't look inside. Back at my apartment, the sun had moved across the room. Light fell in long rectangles on the floor, touching the fern, the bookshelf, the new dining chair I'd found at a thrift store. I unpacked a frame I'd been saving. The photo was simple. Me, standing in front of the hospital on the day I was promoted to charge nurse. No family. No speeches. Just me in scrubs, squinting into the sun, smiling like I knew something the world didn't. I hung it on the wall above my desk. Centered. Straight. And finally, mine. I stepped back and looked at it for a long time. Then I sat down and wrote in my journal, "Forgiveness isn't silence, and silence isn't love. I don't owe peace to anyone who tried to take me apart. But I owe myself this, my life on my terms." Some evenings, when the light hits just right, I walk out to the edge of the lot where my lavender bush has started to bloom. It's not much, but it's enough. I kneel beside it, pull a few weeds, and let the wind carry whatever's left of the past away. I don't think about Reed every day anymore, and when I do, I don't feel the sharpness I once did. What's done is done. The name we shared was misused, but the man I've become because of it, he's solid, rooted, and no longer afraid. My mother calls sometimes. We don't talk long, but the words are gentler, more real. No grand gestures, just, "How are you sleeping?" Or, "Did the plant make it through the cold snap?" It's enough. I haven't spoken to my father since the courthouse, but I sent him a card at Christmas, unsigned except for a photo of the house blueprint, a quiet offering. He never replied, and that's all right too. I've come to understand that forgiveness doesn't always need an audience. It doesn't require a ceremony or an apology that comes on time. Sometimes forgiveness is just living, fully, authentically, without resentment curling in your chest like smoke that never clears. And maybe that's the best kind of healing there is, one where the air feels lighter, not because someone fixed the hurt, but because you stopped carrying it. I'm not the loudest voice in the room. I never will be. But I've learned how to speak clearly, in my name, for my life, on my terms, and that is more than enough. You don't have to sacrifice your peace just to keep others comfortable. In every family, boundaries matter. When trust is broken, silence doesn't preserve love, it erases identity. Speak up when it counts. Heal on your own timeline. Forgiveness is powerful, but so is protecting your name. And the two aren't enemies. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to like the video and subscribe to our channel. We share true-to-life family stories that offer healing, reflection, and quiet strength. Discover more tales that might just echo your own journey.